I'll call the Human Services Committee Board meeting to order. Affidavit. This agenda was posted in the office of the county clerk on the 18th day of August, 2021. Notice was sent to the West Bend Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. We do not have a quorum today since it's Lois and I. However, we can continue with the meeting since we really don't have any action items on the agenda other than the minutes, approval of the June 23rd minutes, which we will postpone to our next meeting, and we'll take that up there then. So at this point, would you please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. So we'll start with our first discussion item, which is the Wisconsin Home Energy Program. And Julie, you're presenting on this.
Presenting. Good. Well, good. Well, you guys I have your undivided attention, the two of you. How exciting. In this report, what we discussed was a change in the Wisconsin Home Energy Program that historically Washington County has ran for the state of Wisconsin. If you're not familiar with home energy, generally around winter time, the home energy program provides a subsidy for people to ensure that they do not get their heat or electric turned off during the cold winter months. And they provide some level of credit counseling and counseling support to ensure that people can maintain their electricity and their heat. We were approached by the state earlier this year to essentially state that if we wanted to, we did not need to be running the program for them any longer, and that they could contract with a nonprofit. So we did some extensive analysis and conversation with other counties, and it turns out we were one of few counties who were continuing to directly administer the program. Many counties were either contracting with Energy Services Incorporated, or they had sort of given it up to the state in this new fashion that they realized that they did not have to contract with counties. So after that analysis, we took a look at the impact for us budgetarily, and then also the impact for staff purposes. And we made the determination that we would save money, as well as there would be no impact where we would have to lay any staff off. So we made the decision to relinquish our responsibility of administering the home energy program to the state, and then they have contracted with Energy Services Incorporated. We've completed that transition with them, even though our contract with the state goes through the end of September, just because they wanted the time to get everything up and running and a smooth transition. We did fully transition the program to Energy Services Incorporated in August. We still have our staff, one of our staff members she's going to be retiring at the end of September, but she's still employed with us and helping to manage that transition, especially if there's any individuals who are calling the county and needing to know where to go. But we've had no issues with the transition. It's been very smooth, and there's been no interruption in services to our residents. And so we think that this is going to be a really good sort of win-win outcome for this program.
Was there only one employee that was affected by this?
So there were two employees. One employee is retiring, and then and she's been working for the county for over 30 years. And then one employee we were able to move into an open economic support position. There were some other employees who provided some support to the program as part of their duties. And so we've just shifted their duties around and added on other duties, but they were probably only like 10% of their time type of thing. But these 2 employees did this full time, but they have both been accounted for.
Right. And in case anyone is watching this committee meeting, there was a cost savings to the county of over $90,000, right?
That's correct.
So
Yep.
That's good. I
Mhm.
like that. Any questions, Lois?
No questions. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I would compliment you, Julie, on the report that you gave on this. I think you covered all your bases on here. It really was an excellent explanation of why this was done and how you did your homework before you contracted with is it ESI?
Yep. ESI.
And-
That's correct.
okay,
Yes.
Great.
Thank
Good
you very
job.
much. I just, in case anybody's watching, Sandy Hofert, our deputy director, she really spearheaded this and led this initiative. So we're very thankful for her work on this.
Good. Just another proof that we have great employees here at Washington County.
That's right.
Okay, and then our next item is Washington County Opioid Treatment Services Needs Assessment.
So as you guys may recall, in the last county board meeting, Attorney Brad Stern provided an update on the opioid settlement funding that we will eventually receive. And so part of our strategy in preparing for the receipt of that funding is to start looking and proactively looking at what could we do with that money? Where is the need? How will we actually disseminate that money out into the community? As you recall, we don't exactly know how much at this point. We don't know when we'll get the dollars, but we do want to be prepared because it is the funding is much needed to continue to support people in recovery and to mitigate the impact of opioids in our community. And so we don't want it to sit any longer than it needs to. And we want to be prepared. So the first step in this was really to do this needs assessment to develop sort of a foundational framework because eventually we will be coming back to this committee and to the board, to request to spend that money. And so wanted to start doing some basic foundational groundwork with you so that you kind of have some sense of what the need in the community is. We have over the last 4.5 years that I've been here, we've steadily increased our reach into the community and the services that we provide. And we've, are doing ongoing analysis of what we think is needed, where we can improve services or where we can change some of our services. And so we had a fairly decent sense of what we thought would be some of the areas to focus on, but we didn't want to make this needs or describe this needs assessment and make these decisions in a vacuum. So we did do a community survey that was completed and got a lot of interesting feedback. Essentially, what we found, it was pretty consistent with what we thought as well. So there wasn't anything that was a surprise. I think it just really underscored, some of the things that we have identified are areas to focus on. I'm not going to bore you with reading through the whole thing. I'm sure you guys already read it, but I would say in the summary and the last page of this report, some of the major areas of focus that we know are sorely needed in our community to help individuals in their recovery is sober living specifically for women, as well as probably an increase for men as well, but a number one focus for sober living services for women. There's some need for work around coordinated entry in this needs assessment and in other conversations I've had in the last 4 years. There does seem to be some barriers in accessing services because we don't have a coordinated entry because so many different places are providing services and people have different insurance and they have different needs. And so there is some work that I think that can be done around improving sort of the access point for people so that when they're ready for recovery, they're not getting a door shut in their face. Because what we know about people who are ready to start recovery is it's a very small window. And if they don't get access to services, likely they go back to using and then, have to come around again before they're ready for taking the step to recovery. There's also a pretty good underlying theme around the general cost of treatment, either because folks don't have insurance, or if they do have insurance, their copays or their deductibles are very high and they can't afford those services. So I think that there's some work that we can do around supporting that as well. And then, of course, as you know, our feathers in our cap are our diversion programming and our drug treatment court. And those are two very successful, very impactful programs that are currently funded by grant dollars. And of course, if those grant dollars were to ever go away, we could utilize these settlement dollars to continue those services. So that's obviously also an option for us. And then a couple other things, we're just increasing services for treatment for services for people in the jail. And then also transportation was a big thing that people talked about as a need for individuals.
Regarding the sober living, transition living for both men and women, if I remember reading correctly, there is something for men in Kewaskum.
Yep.
But
So one of
there's-
our, we have a provider in Washington County in Kewaskum, Exodus House. They're a great partner for us, and they provide a 30 to 90 day residential for people who need to get sober. And then they have a sober living house as a transition. And so that is available to men only, but it is also only for people who go through their 30 to 90 day treatment facility. And so if we have people who go elsewhere for 30 or 60 or 90 days, and then it would be a good idea for them to step down into a sober living, they cannot use Exodus House.
So how would these funds, or how would we use these funds to establish something like that for women?
Yeah. So, and interestingly, because of drug treatment court and the advocacy that Judge Martins has been doing, there has already been lots of conversations going on in the community about how to get this started. And there's some vested interest, and people who want to make this happen, they need funding. So essentially the funding could go to helping to purchase a home, and then contracting with an organization to run that home. Because to have a quality evidence-based sober living, that has to have a framework, an evidence-based framework that you follow, because otherwise, you could get into a situation where it's just a bunch of people living together and there's not a lot of rules that guide it. And so really the funding would be, I sort of envision it as more startup money or seed money for a outside entity or a nonprofit to get this going.
Okay, good. I was fortunate enough to attend the, I think it was the very first graduation from drug court. So I was very impressed with the young lady who graduated, as well as listening to the stories of the other people that were there. It sounds like it's a great program, because if you become an addict, you end up committing criminal offenses to make sure that your habit keeps going. So that we really need to help these people as best we can. So I'm grateful for that. Lois, do you have any questions?
Yeah, just want to, can you turn me on, or do I need to be on? The only question I guess I thought that most of this happened in a hospital setting. And and is my idea wrong on that?
Yeah. So there's various levels of treatment, and it depends on individual's clinical need. So an inpatient hospital stay is the highest level of clinical need, and that is what generally detox, and that is a very short period of time. And then the step down from that is what we call residential treatment, which is where somebody might stay for 30, 60, or 90 days. That is still considered sort of the highest level of treatment. But then obviously after somebody gets that initial period of sobriety, that's something that they have to continue to work on. And so something like sober living then is the next step to that, because instead of they come out of these residential placements, and if they don't have a supportive environment or a place to go, the only place for them to go back to is generally the environment in which they came from, which is where they were using. And so sober living is a supportive environment that's overseen by a house manager where other people are in recovery. And generally you can stay there for up to a year and a half, but you're working, you're paying rent. So it's just that next step. Not everybody needs that next step, but there are people that do need that. And it is something that does not exist to that degree and level in Washington County. And then sort of the next phase, or even an entry point for people who maybe don't have clinical needs that are in where they need residential or hospitalization, is something called intensive outpatient, where they're just going every day to treatment and they're having group and individual therapy. Maybe they're doing drug screening. And they're just working on their sobriety. And so some people actually just start there as well. It just really depends on their level of addiction. Sometimes it's a safety thing, right? Because especially with opioids, people are at really high risk for overdosing at any point in time. So there are various levels of treatment. And then even after people graduate intensive outpatient, they might continue on with an individual therapist, and then sort of what most people know as like Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, those type of like drop-in support groups.
So I guess, would a high percentage of the cost be in the sheriff's department? Or, I mean, have you looked that far yet?
So generally, I mean, right now we have, our drug treatment court and our diversion programming. And so that's keeping people out of the criminal justice system or out of jail, so to speak. We do have a current project that we are in partnership with the jail, where we're getting people medication assisted treatment prior to leaving the jail. And that has been very successful, because when people have been in jail, say they're sitting over at the jailhouse for 30 days or 60 days, they're really at high, when they get released, they're at high risk for overdose, because if they decide to go use, a lot of times they'll go and use the same level or the same amount that they used before, but now their body has, detoxed, and then they're really high risk for overdose. So we try to get them on this medication assisted treatment, which eliminates the cravings and ideally, eliminates them from wanting to go use. But I do think that there's more work, and obviously, this would be in partnership with the sheriff and conversations with them around, seeing if we could do something more directly in the jail around providing people treatment while they're there. So that is an option or an opportunity that we could explore.
Okay. I guess you answered my question. I guess I was looking at it as that a high level of the cost is just the fact that people are being picked up by the sheriff's department, and that there's a high level of cost there, but you're really looking more at treatment. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I think, you're 100% right. And so there's two ways, right. So the drug treatment court and the diversion program is aimed at, keeping people out of jail and getting them sober so that they don't, keep being repeat offenders and keep going into jail. But then also if we improved our treatment, entry point and our treatment access, then ideally people would be in treatment and not out there committing crimes. And so that could have, all of this could and will have an impact on the number of people who are going into the criminal justice system, because you're doing more intervention up front.
So, and then the dollars that we're potentially going to get, do we need to show need to get those dollars, or is it just going to be distributed based on, I don't know, maybe population or something, or don't we know that yet?
So because we signed on to the settlement, we will get dollars because we're part of the, I don't know what the
Lawsuit.
legalese is, but yeah. So we will get dollars. How they'll determine that, Washington County versus Milwaukee County versus Dane County, I don't know. It might be population based. It could be need. I know that we've been eligible and received, some very important dollars to help us do some of the initiatives that we have now, just because of where Washington County ranks in the number of overdoses and people being arrested for opioid related issues. So we do rank higher than many other counties. We do. We're in the top 20.
Wow, out of 72 counties, I'm
Yeah.
surprised.
Yep. So, but then to finish answering your question, then when we get the dollars, this is just the beginning of trying to get some framework around what could we do with it, right? So when we get the dollars, we're not like, oh, now we have to decide, right?
Sure.
So that we can start making quick decisions and getting those dollars out there. But I'll continue to have meetings and conversations with our partners in the community because obviously, Washington County Human Services has a piece of this that we provide directly, but there's so many other community partners and providers in the community who do this that I think, could use some support in reaching more people.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
I do applaud you for being proactive. I do applaud you, Julie, for being proactive on this topic. And Lois, you seemed a little surprised when you heard about we're in the top 20. I can remember when I started here as a employee in the court system, I couldn't believe some of the crimes I saw coming across, because when you're raised in I don't want to say normal family, but at least, yeah. You don't realize what goes on until
Mhm.
you're involved in stuff like that. So
Yeah, and I would just add, I think that's one of the biggest issues with the opioid epidemic is that it was devastating across the whole country, and it really cut through socioeconomic
Yep.
And racial families and individuals. It was kind of this. The way that it was marketed, if you ever watch, there's some stuff on Netflix, if you're ever really interested to watch some documentaries about how the pharmaceutical companies really marketed this and essentially really created this crisis. And families who would have never thought that their, loved one would be impacted by this have just been devastated for years. And so, I also recall when you started hearing about heroin arrests, and it's kind of like, who does heroin? Like, nobody does heroin anymore, right? And then it's been, over the last 10, 12 years, it's just blown up. And so this is just, one way to try to mitigate that. And so I was very grateful that, Washington County decided to be part of the settlement, that our county attorney, signed us up for that. So hopefully it will have an impact for us in the long term. I think it's pretty stable. It's not to sound positive, pretty similar, but what we're actually also seeing now, because it's becoming harder to get pills and those sort of things because of, the mitigation strategies that have been put into place, we are seeing an increase in methamphetamines. And so people are starting to use that. And we don't have a lot of strategies at this point for mitigation of that. So.
a number of years ago that we did have one of the sheriff's deputies talk to Human Services and explain to us the different drugs and how he had a very interesting talk. He is now retired. But maybe we need to look at something like that, maybe having one of
Yeah.
them come in to the committee meeting and give some kind of a presentation on that.
Okay,
Might be interesting.
absolutely.
Okay. I think that's it. You're no more questions? That's it? Okay. Then our next meeting date is Wednesday, September 22nd at 4:30, and hopefully we'll have a full quorum on that date.
Well, it'll be budget time, so hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully it's right. Okay, well, September is going to be another important meeting because we've got Samaritan to deal
Mhm.
with. So that's that. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And good afternoon.